My name is Elizabeth Monroe, 32 years old, an accountant living in Boston. For most of my life, I believed family was where you could always return, a place that would never shut its doors, no matter what storms raged outside. But sometimes, the storm doesn't come from the world. It comes from inside your own bloodline. It was Christmas Eve. Snow had been falling gently in the morning, nothing unusual for Boston in December. I had ironed a simple green dress, laid out my boots, and wrapped a bottle of wine to bring as a gift. There was a faint excitement inside me, because no matter how many years I had felt like the shadow compared to my younger sister, I still wanted to believe that tonight, maybe, just maybe, things would feel different. In the late afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Her words were short, cold, almost careless. Elizabeth, we need to cancel the dinner. Terrible snowstorm ahead. Too dangerous to drive. We'll reschedule after the holidays. I stared at the screen. I walked to the window. Outside, the sky was pale but clear. No storm clouds, no heavy wind. Just quiet flakes drifting like feathers. It was the kind of snow Boston people barely noticed. Nothing close to dangerous. I texted back, "Are you sure? The weather looks calm here." Minutes ticked by. Her reply came, "Yes, absolutely. We don't want to risk it. Stay safe. Merry Christmas, darling." The word darling felt hollow, like a curtain trying to cover something broken behind it. I sat on the couch, still holding my wrapped bottle of wine. The house was silent. Christmas lights from my neighbors' homes glowed across the street. I whispered to myself, almost to fill the silence. So that's it? Canceled. Just like that. A part of me wanted to accept it, to believe the storm excuse, but deep down, an unease was stirring. A familiar ache, the feeling that once again, I was left out of something. Hours later, while scrolling through my phone, I saw it. A bright square of color, a picture that cut deeper than any snowstorm could. It was my cousin's Instagram post. The caption read, "Best Christmas ever. So grateful for family." In the photo, my mother, my father, my sister Anna, uncles, aunts, everyone, all gathered around the long dining table. A golden roasted turkey sat in the middle, wine glasses raised high, smiles shining. The room was glowing with warmth, and behind them, through the windows, I could see the evening sky. Clear, no storm, not even a flake. I felt my chest tighten. The screen blurred as my eyes filled. They had lied, not just a little white lie, but a deliberate, cruel exclusion. My hand shook as I whispered out loud, "They're all there, without me." I replayed the moment in my head, the message, the warning of a storm, the pretend concern. And now the truth was staring right at me through a digital window. They had chosen to lock me out, like I was a stranger, not a daughter, not a sister, not family. I dropped the phone on the couch, pressed my palms against my face, and sat there in the dark. Memories of past years returned, the times I was forgotten in conversations, the times Anna's achievements were celebrated while my hard work was brushed aside. But this was different. This was public. This was a statement. They wanted a Christmas without me. I imagined the sounds I could not hear, the clinking of forks, the bursts of laughter, Anna telling her stories while my mother hung on every word, and then my father lifting his glass. To family. The irony cut through me like glass. For a while, I just sat in silence. The bottle of wine still wrapped on the table seemed ridiculous now, a gift for a celebration I was never meant to attend. I wanted to smash it, but instead, I just touched the ribbon and whispered, "Why am I never enough?" Hours passed slowly. The glow of Christmas outside contrasted with the emptiness inside me. And though I was alone in that room, I felt crowded by shadows, the weight of betrayal, the echoes of false words. My phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another picture. This time, Anna had posted a video. She laughed as she held the camera, spinning it across the table. "Cheers to family," she said into the phone, and I heard my mother's voice in the background, bright and alive. "To family!" I pressed pause. I stared at Anna's smiling face on the screen. Then, for the first time in years, something inside me shifted. Not sadness, not jealousy, but a sharp edge of clarity. I whispered to myself, "They lied to me, and they didn't even care if I found out." A storm was coming, yes, but not the one they had warned me about. It was rising inside me, slow and steady, like thunder in the distance. That night, sitting alone in my small apartment, I realized something I had always tried to avoid. I was not part of their family, not in the way that mattered. And if they thought they could push me aside forever, they were about to discover how wrong they were. Because this Christmas, something in me broke free. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces in those pictures again. The lights glowing, Anna laughing, my mother raising a glass. The soundless video replayed in my head, but I could almost hear them anyway. It was torture, the kind that presses on your chest until you can barely breathe. By morning, I knew I couldn't stay silent. If they wanted me invisible, if they thought I would just swallow the lie like I had so many times before, they were wrong. I sat at my small desk, laptop open, fingers hovering above the keyboard. The blinking cursor seemed alive, like a clock ticking in my ear. I whispered to myself, "It's time. It's time to stop pretending." I began to type, "Dear family." The word looked ugly on the screen, but I let it stand. They needed to read it. I wrote about the storm that never came. I wrote about the empty seat that should have been mine. I attached the photographs from Instagram. The smiling faces, the roasted turkey, the golden light. It was more than proof. It was betrayal captured in pixels. The words spilled out of me, broken but sharp. "You lied to me. You told me it was too dangerous to come, that the weather would make it impossible. But there was no storm. The only storm was the one you created, the one you used to shut me out." I paused. My hands trembled. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in the quiet apartment, but I kept going. "You could have told me the truth, that you didn't want me there, that I was never really wanted at all. That would have cut deep, but at least it would have been honest. Instead, you chose to lie, and you smiled while you did it." Tears blurred my vision, but anger cleared them away. It was as though every year of being overlooked, every birthday forgotten, every holiday where Anna was the star and I was the shadow, all of it poured through my hands and onto the screen. I wrote one last line before signing my name. I deserve honesty. I deserve respect. If you cannot give me either, then maybe I don't need to be part of this family at all. I attached the photos. I stared at the email one last time. Then I pressed send. The sound of the button clicking was small, almost pathetic, but inside me it thundered like a war drum. The waiting began. Minutes stretched into hours. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened. Finally, a reply arrived, from my mother. Her words were short, cold, the kind you use to swat away a fly. "You're overreacting, Elizabeth. It was just dinner." I read it once, twice, again. Each time it cut deeper. Just dinner. As if betrayal could be reduced to a plate of food. As if my pain was an exaggeration. I whispered into the silence, my voice trembling but fierce. "Just dinner? No, it was never just dinner." Another reply came later, this one from Anna. Her tone dripped with scorn. "Elizabeth, you always play the victim. Not everything is about you. Maybe if you weren't so difficult, you'd be invited more often." I stared at the screen. The words lit up like fire. Difficult. Victim. Labels they had thrown at me since I was a child, sharp enough to stick even years later. I almost typed back right away. My fingers hovered over the keys, desperate to unleash everything I had buried for so long. But something inside me said, no, not yet. Not like this. I closed my laptop slowly, watching my reflection fade into the dark screen. My own face stared back, pale, exhausted, but not broken. For the first time in years, I didn't see weakness there. I saw someone pushed to the edge, someone finally ready to fight back. Lying in bed that night, I replayed their words in my head. You're overreacting. You always play the victim. It was almost funny how quickly they dismissed me, as if the years of hurt meant nothing, as if the empty seat at their table was nothing more than bad luck. But somewhere deep inside, a seed had been planted. Their responses were not just cruel. They were careless. Careless enough to make me wonder, what else had they hidden from me? What else had they lied about? I thought of my grandfather, the only one who had ever made me feel seen, who used to tell me, Elizabeth, one day you'll realize your worth isn't measured by them. When he died, I was 21. Back then, my parents had insisted on handling all the legal matters, assuring me everything was taken care of. At the time, I was too young, too trusting, too naive to question it. But now, staring at their dismissive replies, I felt the threads pulling together, the storm excuse, the lies, the exclusion, the silence. They had been shutting me out for years. Christmas dinner was not the first betrayal. It was only the clearest one. I turned in bed, staring at the ceiling, whispering into the dark. There's more. I know there's more. I didn't know it yet, but soon the truth would come knocking at my door, and when it did, it would tear apart the last illusions I had about family. The days after Christmas felt heavy, like a fog that refused to lift. I had sent my email, spilled out my anger, exposed their lie, and yet nothing had changed. Their replies still echoed in my head. You're overreacting, Elizabeth. You always play the victim. I tried to bury myself in work, in numbers and spreadsheets, in the predictable order of columns and balances. Numbers don't lie. Numbers don't dismiss you. Numbers don't smile in your face while cutting you out of the picture. But one evening, as I sat at my desk with a mug of cold coffee, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. For a moment, I almost ignored it. But something in me, a quiet pull, told me to answer. Hello? I said cautiously. A deep, steady voice came through. Elizabeth? This is David Harris. You may not remember me, but I was an old friend of your grandfather's. I froze. The mention of my grandfather, the only person who had ever truly believed in me, sent a wave of warmth and grief through me. I hadn't heard his name spoken with kindness in years. I remember, I whispered. You used to visit him on Sundays. He always called you his chess partner. The man chuckled softly on the other end. That's right. He always cheated, though. Claimed it was strategy. For a brief second, I smiled, but the smile faded quickly, because I knew he hadn't called just to reminisce. Elizabeth, he continued, his voice growing heavier. I'm calling because there's something you need to know, something your parents never told you. My grip on the phone tightened. I held my breath, afraid of the words that might come next. When your grandfather passed, he left you an inheritance, around $300,000. It was meant for you, his way of making sure you'd always be taken care of. The world tilted. My heart pounded in my ears. I pressed the phone closer, almost as if the distance between us could make the truth less shattering. What? I whispered. No, they never told me. They said everything was already handled, that there wasn't anything left for me. David's sigh was long, weary. I suspected as much. I tried to reach out years ago, but your parents made it clear they were in charge as your guardians at the time. I didn't want to cause conflict, but I've seen things recently that confirm what I feared. What things? My voice cracked. Bank records, transfers. The money was never placed in your name. Instead, it was rerouted, straight into Anna's account. And I don't need to tell you what it's been used for. Vacations, shopping, a lifestyle she could never have afforded on her own. My stomach twisted. Images of Anna flashed through my mind. Her constant new clothes, her photos from Italy, Paris, Hawaii, all those smiling posts on social media. I had told myself she worked hard, or maybe my parents helped her a little. But now, the truth snapped into place. It wasn't help. It was theft. I whispered into the silence of my apartment, my voice shaking. They stole it from me. My own parents. They stole from me. David's voice softened. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. I thought you should know. Your grandfather wanted you to be safe, to have a foundation to build your life. He trusted them to protect it for you. Instead, his words trailed off, but he didn't need to finish. The silence said enough. I sat there, gripping the phone, staring at the wall. The betrayal I had felt at Christmas dinner now seemed small compared to this. That was exclusion. This was robbery. A deliberate act, carried out in secret, covered with lies for over a decade. I don't know what to do, I whispered. David paused before replying. You're an accountant, aren't you? You understand records, numbers. You'll know how to follow the trail. Just be careful, and don't let them tell you you're imagining it. You're not. I closed my eyes, letting his words sink in. For so long, I had doubted myself. Every time they dismissed me, I believed maybe I was too sensitive, maybe I was difficult, maybe I was the problem. But now I had proof that the problem had never been me. It had been them, all along. Thank you, I finally said, my voice steadier than before. Thank you for telling me. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my apartment. The city lights flickered outside my window, but inside, the shadows grew deeper. I thought of my grandfather, his warm smile, the way he used to press a quarter into my palm and whisper, "Always keep what's yours safe." I had failed him. Or maybe my parents had made sure I could never succeed. I pulled out a notebook, opened my laptop, and began to write. Dates, transfers, Anna's expenses, patterns I had ignored before. The numbers began to speak, and I listened. The betrayal of Christmas dinner had cracked the surface. But this inheritance theft? It was the earthquake that split everything apart. And as I stared at the growing list of evidence, a thought rose in me, sharp, cold, undeniable. If they thought I would let this go, if they thought I would stay silent like before, they had no idea what was coming. When David hung up, I sat frozen for a long time. The silence around me was thick, suffocating, almost alive. The truth about the inheritance echoed in my chest like a drumbeat, steady, relentless. $300,000. 300,000 stolen pieces of love and trust. But even as I tried to process it, another thought began to surface. This wasn't new. This wasn't sudden. This betrayal had been years in the making, and it had started long before Christmas dinner. I closed my eyes and was pulled back into my childhood. I could hear the clinking of dishes in our old kitchen, the sound of my mother's voice, sharp and sweet at the same time. Elizabeth, why can't you be more like Anna? The words had been etched into me, repeated so often they became a second name. Anna was the golden child, the pretty one, the talented one, the one whose grades were praised at the dinner table while mine were brushed aside with a distracted nod, the one who wore new clothes while mine were hand-me-downs that never quite fit, the one who got the first slice of cake, the louder applause, the longer hugs. I remembered standing in the school auditorium holding a math certificate. I was 12. My heart had swelled with pride, waiting to see my parents' faces in the crowd. But when the ceremony ended, my mother only said, "That's nice, Elizabeth. But did you hear Anna's choir solo? She was magnificent." I remembered birthdays where Anna's gifts sparkled with ribbons and toys, while mine were practical, plain. A new notebook, a sweater. I told myself it didn't matter. That love wasn't measured in wrapping paper. But children know. They always know. And now, years later, sitting in my empty apartment, I saw the pattern so clearly. Christmas wasn't an accident. The inheritance wasn't a one-time theft. It was the continuation of a story I had been forced to live since childhood. A story where I was the shadow and Anna was the light. A story where my existence was tolerated but never celebrated. The lie about the storm was not just about dinner. It was a symbol. It was the mask ripped away to reveal what had always been underneath. They didn't want me. They never had. For so long, I had swallowed the pain. I had told myself I was imagining it, that maybe I was too sensitive, that maybe they really did love me, just in their own way. But now the truth stood in front of me like an open wound, and the wound was bleeding from two places, the past I had survived, and the present I could no longer deny. I whispered into the quiet of my apartment, "No more." The words startled me, sharp and loud in the stillness, but I repeated them, firmer this time. "No more." I thought of my grandfather again, the way he used to look at me with eyes full of pride when no one else noticed. I remembered him saying once as we sat on the porch, "Elizabeth, one day you'll learn to fight for what's yours. Don't let anyone take it away from you, not even your own family." At the time, I hadn't understood. I had thought he was just being dramatic, trying to prepare me for the world. But now, I realized he had seen it long before I did. He knew what they were capable of, and he had tried to leave me the tools to protect myself. The lie of Christmas had cut me deeply. The stolen inheritance cut me even deeper. Together, they carved a truth I could no longer ignore. I had been betrayed twice over. First as a child starved of love, and now as an adult robbed of my future. But the difference was this. The little girl I used to be had no voice. The woman I am now does. I stood and walked to the mirror, staring at my reflection. I was tired. I was hurt. But I was not broken. Not anymore. I spoke out loud, my voice trembling but fierce. They wanted me silent. They wanted me small. But I will not be silent. Not again. For the first time in years, I felt something ignite inside me. Not just anger, but determination. A fire that could no longer be smothered by their lies. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew this. The time for silence was over. The time for reckoning had begun. The evidence was real, undeniable. And yet I knew holding the truth wasn't enough. Not with them. My family had never cared about truth. They had lived their lives bending it, twisting it, using it only when it served them. If I wanted to win, truly win, I needed a plan sharper than their lies, stronger than their manipulation. So I began to build one. My apartment became a war room. The coffee table drowned under stacks of papers, receipts, bank statements I had clawed back from digital archives. A corkboard stretched across one wall, covered in lines and arrows like veins of a broken heart. Every arrow pointed to the same conclusion: theft, betrayal, a lifetime of being robbed. I leaned over the board, whispering to myself, "This isn't just numbers. This is blood. This is proof of every time they chose Anna over me." The accountant in me took control. I built spreadsheets that mapped the flow of money down to the cent. On one side, the dates of estate withdrawals. On the other, Anna's indulgences. Paris, spring 2017. Withdrawal $60,000. Hawaii 2 years later. Withdrawal $30,000. Designer handbags, new cars, luxury apartments, all lined up with stolen dollars. It was horrifying, but it was also intoxicating. Because for once, I wasn't blind anymore. I wasn't the child begging for recognition, or the forgotten daughter waiting by the phone. I was the investigator, and I was in control. Still, evidence alone would never be enough. I knew my parents. They would sneer, they would deny, they would say, "You're overreacting," the way they always did. No, I had to go further. I had to make this airtight, legal, undeniable, devastating. So I began my research. I read about inheritance law until the words blurred together. Guardianship responsibilities, breach of fiduciary duty, fraud statutes. I underlined, highlighted, filled notebooks with phrases that burned into my mind. Words like embezzlement, breach of trust, fraudulent conversion. Each word was a weapon, sharper than any knife. I whispered them to myself at night, like vows. Breach of trust, fraud, embezzlement. These will be the words that cage them. But even that wasn't enough. I needed someone who could wield those words better than I could. So I searched for attorneys. Late at night, long after the city outside had gone to sleep, I scrolled through profiles of law firms. Some were cold, corporate giants, but others specialized in cases like mine. Inheritance disputes drenched in betrayal. I marked their numbers, saving them for the day I would be ready. And then came the hardest part, preparing myself. Because revenge isn't just about evidence. It's about standing face to face with the people who hurt you and refusing to let them break you again. I knew the confrontation would come. It had to. Before the courts, before the police. I wanted to see their faces when they realized the game was over. So I practiced. Yes, I actually practiced. Standing in front of my mirror, papers in my hands, I spoke as though they were sitting across from me. You stole from me. You lied to me. You treated me like nothing, but you will not dismiss me anymore. I watched myself in the reflection, my eyes fierce, my voice trembling but steady. The first time, I broke down crying halfway through. The second time, I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. The third time, I spoke the words and believed them. I could already hear my mother's voice in my head. "Elizabeth, you're exaggerating. We did what we thought was best." And my father, his tone cold and heavy. "You should be grateful for what you had." And Anna, her mocking laugh. "You're pathetic. Always jealous. Always the victim." But this time I was ready. For every dismissal, I had an answer. For every denial, I had evidence. For every lie, I had the truth in black and white. I imagined their faces when I laid out the evidence in front of them. The shock in my mother's eyes as she saw the highlighted statements. The anger on my father's face when he realized there was no way out. And Anna, the smirk finally wiped away, replaced by the realization that her luxury had been bought with stolen blood. I whispered into the empty room. That's what I want. Not just to punish them. I want them to know. I want them to feel the walls close in. So I built the plan in 3 steps. First, the confrontation. Lay the evidence in front of them. Give them the chance to confess, to return what they stole, to beg for mercy. I doubted they would take it, but I would offer it anyway so they could never say I hadn't. Second, the collapse. When they refused, and I knew they would, I would unleash everything. Lawyers, investigators, courts, every paper, every receipt, every dollar laid bare for the world to see. The law would be the knife that cut through their lies. And third, the silence after, not mine, theirs. The silence of a family torn down by its own corruption. The silence of handcuffs and slammed doors. The silence they had given me all my life returned to them tenfold. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the map of betrayal pinned across my wall. My apartment was silent, but inside me burned a storm, steady and consuming. I thought of Christmas again, the empty seat at the table, the glass of wine I never raised. That was the moment I became invisible to them. But this was the moment I would make them see me. I pressed my hand against the stack of papers, the weight of truth heavy but solid. And I whispered a promise to myself, to my grandfather, to the little girl I used to be. They thought I was weak. They thought I was silent. But now, I am their reckoning. The day of the meeting, the air felt heavier than usual. I had spent nights imagining this moment, rehearsing my words, preparing my evidence, steadying my breath. And now it was here. No turning back. I chose a small cafe downtown, neutral ground. No cozy living room where my mother could try to guilt me. No family home where they could make me feel small again. Here, we would sit at the same table, equals or as close to equals as we had ever been. I arrived early. The binder of evidence lay in my bag, thick and heavy, a silent witness waiting to be called. I ordered a coffee, but I didn't drink it. My hands rested flat on the table, trying to still the tremor in my fingers. Then they walked in. My parents first, my mother with her tight smile, my father stiff, already frowning, and then Anna, her heels clicking against the tile, her eyes filled with that same mocking shine I had known since childhood. They sat across from me as if this were nothing more than another family gathering. "Elizabeth," my mother said, forcing sweetness. "You look tired. Are you sure this was necessary?" I leaned forward, my voice calm, measured. "Yes, it was necessary." I pulled the binder from my bag and placed it on the table with a thud. They exchanged glances. Anna rolled her eyes. "What is this now?" she scoffed. I opened the binder slowly, page after page of highlighted statements, receipts, photographs. "Proof," I said quietly. "Proof of what you did. Proof of what you stole." My father's voice grew hard. "This again? Elizabeth, enough with the accusations." But I didn't let him interrupt. I slid the first set of documents across the table. The estate papers, the letter naming me as heir, then the transfers. The deposits into Anna's account, the matching dates with her vacations, her shopping sprees. My voice was steady, almost cold. $300,000. That's what grandfather left for me. That's what you promised to protect. Instead, you funneled it into Anna's account. And here, every cent is tracked. Every lie, every theft, laid out in black and white. For a moment, there was silence. The sound of the cafe around us faded, leaving only the pounding of my heart. Then, my mother laughed softly, a brittle, desperate sound. "Elizabeth, you don't understand. We did what was best for the family. Anna needed help. You've always been fine on your own." Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. "I didn't need help because I learned to survive without you," I replied. "But survival isn't the same as being treated fairly. And this," I tapped the papers, "was not survival. This was theft." Anna leaned forward, her smirk sharp. "Oh, please. You're just jealous, as always. You never liked that I did better, that I had more friends, that people actually wanted me around. Maybe grandfather knew you'd wasted the money. Maybe he wanted me to have it." Her words were poison, but I had prepared for this. I met her eyes and spoke evenly. "Grandfather put my name in writing. He trusted you all to honor his wishes, and you spat on that trust." My father slammed his hand against the table, his face red. "Do you hear yourself? You're tearing this family apart over money. Over money! You've always been selfish, Elizabeth. Always ungrateful. We fed you, we raised you, and this is how you repay us?" The old me might have broken under those words. Might have cried, apologized, begged for forgiveness I didn't owe. But not this time. This time, I stayed calm. I slid the final page across the table, my written summary, neat, damning, undeniable. "I'm not tearing this family apart," I said softly. "You did that the moment you chose lies over love, the moment you stole what was mine and gave it to Anna. This isn't about greed. This is about betrayal." For the first time, their voices faltered. My mother looked away. Anna's smirk twitched. My father's jaw clenched as he stared at the evidence. They knew. They couldn't deny it, but they would never admit it either. My mother finally whispered, almost pleading, "Elizabeth, please, don't do this. We can find a way to make it right. Quietly." But I shook my head. Quietly was how they had stolen from me in the first place. Quietly was how they had erased me, year after year. I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. "If today there is no justice from you," I said, my voice clear, unwavering, "then tomorrow there will be justice from the court." The words hung in the air like a blade. For the first time, I saw fear in their eyes. Real fear. But I didn't linger to savor it. I gathered my binder, stood, and walked away. Behind me, I could hear Anna's hissed whisper, "She'll regret this. She always regrets it." And my father's low growl, "Ungrateful girl." But I didn't turn back, because for once, their voices no longer chained me. I was free, and they knew it. And the morning I filed the lawsuit, the sky over Boston was gray, a kind of heavy gray that seemed to mirror the weight I carried in my chest. I held the binder against me as though it were armor. Inside it lay the truth. Documents, transfers, receipts, signatures. Proof that love had been replaced with theft. I walked into the courthouse with my heart pounding. The marble floors echoed under my steps, every sound reminding me that this was real. At the counter, I spoke my name. My voice trembled at first, then steadied as I repeated it. I signed the forms, slid the evidence across, and watched the clerk stamp each page with a heavy thud. In that moment, I felt something shift. It was as though years of silence cracked open. I whispered to myself as I turned away, "It has begun." My attorney met me outside on the stone steps. Her eyes were calm, steady, almost like an anchor in a storm. She said quietly, "We'll move quickly. Do not respond if they reach out. Let the law carry this now." I nodded. For once, I wasn't alone. Days blurred into one another as the investigation began. The police contacted me, their questions sharp and precise. I gave them everything, every document, every highlighted line, every letter from the estate. Each time I handed over another piece, I felt both lighter and heavier at once. Lighter because the burden was shared, heavier because the truth was now marching forward, unstoppable. One evening, the detective called. Her tone was even, professional, but beneath it, I sensed something more. Confirmation. "Ms. Monroe, we have traced the transfers. The funds were diverted from the estate account directly into your sister's. The pattern is undeniable." I pressed the phone to my ear, my breath sharp. I whispered back, "Thank you." It was all I could manage. Soon after, warrants were issued. I did not see the moment of their arrest, but I heard about it. Neighbors saw the flashing lights outside my parents' house. They saw Anna arguing on the porch, her voice shrill, her defiance useless. They saw my father clench his fists, my mother crying, insisting it was all a mistake. But the officers were unmoved. The evidence spoke louder than their pleas. News traveled fast. By evening, the local channels ran the story. The words embezzlement and fraud scrolled across the screen. My name was hidden, but theirs were not. The faces of the people who had once called themselves my family were now shown to the world under the shadow of crime. I didn't watch for long. I turned the television off after the first report. It was strange to have the story of your life become a headline. Strange and painful, but also strangely just. At the grocery store the next day, people whispered, 2 women near the bread aisle glanced at me, their voices hushed. "That's her. She's the one who stood up to them." Another neighbor stopped me outside my building. Her voice was kind, almost proud. "You did the right thing, Elizabeth. Hard as it is, you did what had to be done." I thanked her softly and kept walking. It felt surreal to be both pitied and admired in the same breath. But in the quiet of my apartment, away from the stairs, I let myself feel what I had been holding back. I cried for the family I had lost long before the handcuffs ever closed. I cried for the little girl who had once believed love was unconditional. And I cried because even though justice was finally here, peace did not come easily. I made tea, held the mug between my palms, and stared at the papers spread across my table. The evidence that had once felt like a burden now felt like a shield. It was the barrier between me and their lies. It was the proof that I was not crazy, not dramatic, not the victim they had painted me to be. That night, I dreamed of my grandfather. We sat on the porch again, his chessboard between us. He looked at me, his eyes warm, and said, "Elizabeth, you did what was right. You kept what was yours safe." When I woke, I whispered back into the darkness, "I did it, Grandpa. I finally did." The next days brought more phone calls, more reports, more noise from the outside world. But inside me, something quiet was settling. It wasn't happiness. No, happiness felt too far away. It was something else, a kind of release, a kind of stillness that comes after years of storms. I walked through my neighborhood one evening, the winter air sharp against my face. A man from down the street nodded at me, his voice gentle. "Tough road, but you're stronger than they'll ever be." I smiled faintly, not because I felt strong, but because maybe he was right. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is simply standing, simply surviving, simply refusing to be silenced any longer. And so I carried both truths with me, the sorrow of what I had lost and the calm of what I had reclaimed. Justice had stepped in. The law had spoken. And though my heart still ached, there was a strange peace in knowing that at last, the silence no longer belonged to them. It belonged to me. When the storm of courtrooms and headlines finally passed, I found myself in an unfamiliar kind of quiet. It wasn't the silence my family had once forced upon me. The cold silence of exclusion, of lies, of closed doors. No, this was different. This silence felt like an open field, wide and waiting, ready for me to step into it. I knew I couldn't stay in Boston. Every corner carried memories, the courthouse, the family house, even the cafes where whispers followed me. I wanted air that wasn't poisoned by betrayal. I wanted streets that hadn't watched me cry. So, I packed up my apartment one box at a time. I left behind almost everything. The corkboard with its arrows and timelines went into the trash. The binder of evidence I had once clung to, I stored it away in a sealed box labeled only past. I kept very little. Just my clothes, a few books, and one photograph. My grandfather smiling on his porch, the sun setting behind him. He was the only part of my family I wanted to carry forward. The day the movers arrived, I stood in the empty apartment and let myself breathe. The walls seemed lighter without the weight of papers and secrets pressed against them. I whispered to the emptiness, "It's over. I'm free." I chose a new city, far enough that the echoes of my family couldn't reach me, but not so far that I had to abandon the seasons I loved. A small coastal town where the air smelled of salt and the mornings carried the sound of gulls. A place where no one knew the story of the Monroes, where Elizabeth was not the daughter who sued her parents, but simply Elizabeth. The first days felt strange. I walked through unfamiliar streets with wide eyes, taking in the bright markets, the quiet bookstores, the cafes where laughter spilled without weight. No one looked at me with pity. No one whispered behind their hand. I was invisible again, but this time it was freedom, not punishment. My new apartment was small, but filled with light. The first morning, I opened the windows and let the ocean air rush in, filling every corner. I set my grandfather's photograph on the desk. I whispered to him, "We made it. We're safe now." Work came easily. A local accounting firm hired me after one interview. They valued my skills, trusted my precision, and, most importantly, treated me with respect. When I spoke in meetings, people listened. They didn't compare me to anyone. They didn't measure me against a sister's shadow. They simply saw me. In the evenings, I began small rituals, cooking dinner with music playing low, watering the plants I bought for the windowsill, walking down to the shore, letting the waves wash against my ankles. Each simple act was a reminder. This life was mine, unstolen, unbroken, yet sometimes the past returned. I would dream of Christmases where my chair sat empty, of my mother's cold messages, of Anna's mocking laugh. I would wake with tears on my pillow, my chest heavy with old wounds. But then I would remind myself those memories no longer defined me. They were scars, yes, but scars are proof of healing. One evening, as I sat on the balcony watching the sun dip into the ocean, I whispered the truth that had grown inside me through every step of this journey. The best revenge is not watching them fall. It is walking away and living the life they could never steal. And I believed it. For the first time, I truly believed it. Neighbors began to know me, not for the scandal, not for the lawsuit, but for the woman who lived in the blue apartment with the plants in the window. They greeted me with warm smiles, invited me for coffee, included me in small gatherings. It wasn't a family, not yet, but it was a beginning, and beginnings can be enough. On Sunday mornings, I walked to the pier with a notebook. I would sit and write, not about the pain, not about the past, but about the future, the trips I wanted to take, the books I wanted to read, the life I wanted to build without permission, without fear. Each page was a quiet declaration. I am not theirs anymore. I am mine. There are still moments when I wonder what my parents think, sitting in their cells, replaying their choices. I wonder if Anna still clings to her vanity, if she blames me for what was always her crime. But then I stop myself, because their story is no longer my story. Their cage is theirs alone, and mine is gone. One morning, I dressed simply, put on a coat, and stepped outside just as the sun rose. The light stretched across the street, golden and soft, touching my face like a blessing. I smiled, a real smile, quiet but certain, because I knew I had stepped out of their shadows at last. The past could no longer own me. The lies could no longer chain me. The silence they forced on me had been broken. Now, the only silence I carried was peace. And as I walked down that street, my head lifted to the light, I whispered one final truth. I am free, and freedom is the only revenge I ever needed.